Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. Hope you're doing well today. Today's topic is going to be homesteading myths and misconceptions. Things you may have heard about homesteading that aren't true. I think it's a pretty good topic. What do you think, Rachel?
I do. Well, that or they're just kind of, I don't know, maybe not true, but not like misconceptions or
Misleading. Yeah.
Misleading or You'll get it. When the more we get into it, they'll understand what we're talking about.
And why I think it might be important is because I think hearing some of these things could either make you not want to homestead or make you leap into homesteading a little bit. A little bit too anxiously, thinking it's everything that you think it might be and when it isn't. So I guess it goes both ways. It can either keep you from it or push you into it a little too aggressively. And I think you need to have a right viewpoint of what, some of these things are and understand them a little bit better. And it may be some of them we're playing with a little bit. Maybe nobody's really saying it, but I think that all these things are things that could possibly be misunderstood.
And I think it gets back to, at the end of it, you'll see that we're kind of getting back to everybody's a homesteader and anybody can homestead, but you'll see that as we go on today.
We'll dive into it here in a minute. Before we get into that, how about some homestead updates? What's going on at your place or your places, Rachel?
Oh man. So yesterday we went out to the property for something else and we totally were surprised when we showed up and there was a bunch of guys in the pit of our basement digging footings and pouring footings. So that was kind of exciting. We're getting footings in. The other thing I have been doing is saving poppy seeds, which I know sounds crazy, but I have these poppies. They're not perennials, but they're annuals. And once they dry out and they tip over, they release literally hundreds of seed for each poppy. So if I don't collect them, my whole garden will be taken over with poppies. So I have to go out there and cut them at the right time when they open up, or I will end up with only poppies in my garden. They're a little bit invasive, but they're so pretty. I let some of them go every year, but I also want to bring them with me. So I've been collecting those. And then you and I talked about last week how we were collecting. We had let our kale, basically our brassicas, our kale, our Brussels sprouts and everything go to seed, which takes 2 years. And I had hundreds of little pods, which you also had, and I had let them dry and I had started playing with them, just, sitting watching some YouTube and TV, because I usually, while I'm watching TV, I'm sometimes doing something. So I've been pulling these seeds apart. And I'm starting to begin to understand why microgreens and sprouts are a new thing, because you need so many seeds to do it. And if you do this by hand, it's a ton of work. Now, if a lot of these companies that sell them probably, I'm guessing, have machines that do this and it's super fast. But so I've spent hours pulling these seeds pods apart to get, I probably at the end of it all, I might have 3 cups, and it was literally 4 or 5 garbage bags full of seed pods.
Here's something I've been doing. You see, and these, I showed you these last week, and this is
and I can hear it.
Mustard seeds. But listen, I don't know if you can hear it or not. Do you hear all the seeds falling in there?
Yep. That's what mine
I
were
have them in a paper bag, and I'm just shaking it every once in a while, and seeds are just falling down to the bottom of that bag like crazy.
Yeah, I think I have one bag that I left to do that with as an experiment, but doing it by hand, I find it kind of satisfying to sit and do that, or I do that with corn and stuff in the winter. But it does make me realize that this is why microgreens and sprout seeds are kind of a new thing. Because 100 years ago, it was way too labor intensive. People just didn't do it, I don't think. Maybe they did, but I think it's kind of new. But it's a ton of work. And
some things are definitely harder to get the seeds, enough of them to do.
And they're super tiny. They're so tiny. But so that's been almost a 2-year project now, because this is the second year to get them to go to flower. So anyways, that's kind of what I've been doing around here. We don't have a lot of vegetables in the garden this year. My tomatoes are getting close, my little pear tomatoes, but still no tomatoes here. I'm kind of sad.
Yeah, I've been getting I posted the other day I had some yellow pear tomatoes that were really good and ripe, and I was eating those and they were so delicious. And then I just went out today and I picked 3 ripe beefsteaks. So
Ooh.
the beefsteaks are ready. I love it. So I actually had me a tomato sandwich today just because I wanted to celebrate my beefsteak.
So I'm a couple of weeks behind you, so maybe I'll have some.
Yeah, I got a ton. I was surprised. I mean, I got the beefsteaks. There was a bunch that are really close. So it's going to be a lot of tomatoes real soon. But cucumbers, man, I've been getting cucumbers.
I saw that you've been canning a ton of.
Yeah, I've been canning cucumbers. Yeah,
well,
like
pickles.
crazy. Yeah, making pickles and making sliced pickles and dill pickles.
So how do you keep yours crispy?
I use grape leaves. I just throw a couple grape leaves in there. And
I didn't know
and I don't. And I'm going to admit, and I don't know, I'm always careful about recommending this because it's not the right thing to do, technically, safely. And that's when I can. Part of the problem with canning pickles is, of course, your water bath canning, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some people who do not even, they'll just boil make their mix or pickle mix, just pour it in, put the lid on and let it seal, right? The heat from that. And I don't do that. But I do only water bath about half the time it suggests.
Yeah.
And
I know people.
That way it doesn't overcook them and make them too soft. So I won't recommend that to anybody because there could possibly be a safety issue, but it's so much vinegar in there and stuff. I just don't even see how anything personally could be an issue, but and they stay pretty crisp.
I have to be honest, as a seasoned canner, I still struggle with getting crisp pickles, especially when I follow the USDA guidelines. The best pickles that we get that are crunchy are still the fermented ones, but they do have a different flavor. They do not taste the same as canned pickles. Yeah.
If you're making like a dill pickle, you need to, honestly, it's like overcooking them is the problem, I think.
Yeah, I do too. And the pickle crisp, I used it last year and they're still not crispy.
I think they do better with the leaves, honestly, than they do with that stuff you put in the.
I think I'm going to try that this time. Well, I don't have.
I think you can use oak. I think you can use like oak leaves and things like that.
You can use so it's the tannin. So you can use grape leaves. You can use oak leaves. You can use horseradish leaves, and you can also use black tea.
Okay, yeah, I've always just used grape leaves. Is what I have a lot of.
Right.
So I use those, and they seem to do all right.
When I ferment, I did not have horseradish before, so I've never tried horseradish, but I've tried grape leaves, the black tea, and the oak leaves, and I've always had the best luck with oak leaves for fermenting and keeping them crispy.
I know I know a lot of people who do not even water bath can them. They simply just boil the pickle, make the pickle juice, pour it in the jar, stick the lid on, and let it seal. And it will seal. I mean, it'll still pop down and do everything it's supposed to do, but it's not the way it's recommended to do.
I know. I would have to say almost everybody I know that cans pickles does it that way. It's called open kettle can.
Yeah, and it
makes not. So everybody understands we're not saying it's safe. It's not a USDA approved method. We're saying that that's what people do.
But like I said, I did stick them in the water bath for about 5 minutes instead of in a quart jar. It's recommended. I think it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I think.
Yeah.
No, it's 20. It's 20 minutes, I believe.
I can't remember off the top of my head. I think
it's 15 for a pint or 10 for a pint and 15 for a quart or something. I stick it in for about 5. I'm boiling water for like 5 minutes just to give that little extra.
Okay.
I do that and they stay pretty crisp. I've ate them 8-9 months into the year and they're still fairly, they're definitely starting to soften up, but they're fairly crisp,
Have you ever, we're going totally on a rabbit trail here. Have you ever tried any steam canning?
No.
Yeah. No, I'm starting. So steam canning became a USDA approved method. I think it was 2016. And I actually like it over water bath canning.
You talked a little bit about it in that canning course you've done for our membership.
It's lighter. You use less water. I don't know. I'm starting to really become a big fan of it.
I think it'd be great for things like pickles, probably, where you just need a little.
Oh, it is. It is. Anything that you can water bath can, you can steam can. I
would say that it would probably make it help with the crispness of the pickles, possibly. Yeah.
I don't know
either. Yeah. Anyway, we're doing that. So we're starting to, kick a lot more canning. I've done some beans and done a few things, but the pickles were first big, like had a couple pots going all at once. And putting some new shelves. I just showed you a minute ago on the camera here. I got some new shelves in my canning area. So I'm going to have I plan on doing a lot more canning and dehydrating this year and stuff like that. So I'm gonna have a lot more stuff in jars. So I wanted more shelving in my room here. So got a lot of storage space for that.
Homesteaders
And
like their shelves. That is not a misconception.
these are pretty nice shelves too. They're metal and they got the wood. They're wood on the. It's not real thick particle board wood, but they're not super heavy duty. But it says it'll hold. I think it's 368 pounds per shelf.
Okay.
So it's pretty heavy duty, and and they just popped together. I mean, but they're pretty nice shelving. I was actually surprised, and they were fairly. I mean, when I compared it to the price of some other shelving, they were very affordable. I mean, there's plastic shelves that are almost as expensive as these, and I like these metal and wood ones better.
I would never use a plastic shelf for canning jars.
No. Me either. I don't either. But so yeah, I put those up, and we're just having more storage. And I started selling some comfrey root on the website for some root cuttings. So anybody that's interested in that. Yeah, I mean, you've
been working on your website, so you have started selling a few extra things.
I used to have the store on there a long time ago. I was selling all kinds of stuff, and it got away from that for a couple of years. But we decided, me and my wife was talking, and we were like, you know what? Let's get the store back up and let's start selling some. I've got so much comfrey out here, and I know Harold doesn't like self-promoting, but you guys should go and see his new website because he's starting to sell a few things there again. New website, new section to the old website. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I got the whole store built on there, and we'll be selling between about May to into September or mid-September. We'll probably sell root cuttings because the thing is, I want people to be able to get the plant in the ground, get it established before winter, and it'll start growing. It'll leaf out, and then it'll die back in the winter, and then next year it'll come on strong. So, it's still enough time to definitely get some in the ground to about that point, because it needs about 6 to 8 weeks before a plant really, if you're planting cuttings. Now, if you plant the crowns, which I've been kind of just mixing together, like when a person orders it, I'm not really selling the crowns and cuttings separately. There'll be usually some crowns in with the cuttings.
So the cutting is a woody section of the root, and the crown comes with the root plus a little bit of like the top, right? It's
basically right at the base of where the plant starts coming out. Now, if you plant those will really start producing a plant in a couple weeks. So there's some of those get mixed in with there. If you see a little green on there, that's a crown. You can actually plant that. And like I said, you'll have a plant in 2 to 3 weeks. You'll have a full leafed out plant. The crowns usually or the root cuttings rather take about 6 to 8 weeks for they'll start really.
Yeah. You gave me some last year, cuttings, and they're probably 3. I've cut them down once and they're 3 feet tall again.
Yeah. So they do really well. And you can take a few of those and you'll have all you want in a few years. No doubt about it. I have tons. But yeah, so we're going to we're selling some, so we can fulfilling a few orders on the comfrey roots. But then I plan on, I've really planted a lot of elderberry around here this year also. So when I start taking cuttings off that in late fall, I'll be selling those elderberry cuttings as well. So we're just going to start selling
your elderberries. Are you going to sell any of your elderberries?
Yeah, the cuttings. That's why.
Not the cuttings. I mean, like the actual berries too.
No, I'm not going to sell the berries. I think we're going to pretty much use. It takes quite a bit of those to really make all the stuff we're wanting to make with them.
Okay.
Syrups and things. So we're going to keep all that, but we are going to sell the cuttings so people can just kind of start their own little elderberry food forest there. But yeah, we just decided to start selling a few more things, and surprised me. Some people even want to buy the leaves, which I was shocked by. Just if they don't want to grow like comfrey leaves and they want to just buy some leaves because they want to make some, say, salves or something. We're selling them some leaves too. So I was kind of surprised that people even want to buy that. And as we looked into that a little bit, we're like, okay, if you want to buy them, we'll sell them. We got tons of them. So yeah, I set up the store. So we've been doing some of that, and just staying busy pulling weeds mostly. The weeds. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the weeds.
Oh, well, we actually, so all summer we've gotten really good rain, and I think I watered twice until we came home Saturday night, and we still hadn't gotten rain. So we watered all night Saturday night. So I've only watered 3 times this year, but we could use rain again, unfortunately. But that watering all night long, we water from the lake. So it's not the same as rainwater, but it certainly is like Miracle Grow, because whatever is in the lake is, man, the weeds. Now I got to go out and weed and hoe and everything else again. But what do you do? Yeah,
I haven't been I haven't been watering the regular garden much, but I have a bunch of stuff in pots now because I've been propagating a lot of trees and things. So I have had to be staying on top of that and watering those because those dry out really fast.
Yeah, pots dry out super fast. That's one
so.
of the things, I always liked the bags. Everybody, that's a big thing right now is for people to use the bags. I really like them. However, they dry out super fast. Yeah. You have to water
you almost have to run some
irrigation or something.
Irrigation to them. Keep them
They just dry out so fast, which is, they work great for many things, but that's just if you use them, just know that you're going to have to water probably twice as much.
Yeah. And with trees, I mean, they can, they're sending down a little bit deeper root in these pots, the ones I'm growing, but still you got to keep them watered pretty good. I mean, I'm going out there every other day and just completely saturating them and then just waiting because it's 80s, and
how are your little black locust trees doing?
They're doing good. I think they're about 6 or 7 inches tall right now. They're doing really good.
Nice. I finally got seeds and I need to scarify them so I can get them. And scarify means you just kind of scratch the surface a little bit. I need to do that and get them going soon.
Yeah, you can do that with a little piece of sandpaper, or you can even just boil them and scarify them that way.
Yeah, I might do that method just because I have 30 seeds.
Yeah, I should have probably tried both just to see which one worked better. I just roughed them up is what I did.
Maybe I will. Maybe I'll do it. They're so small though.
Yeah, I just kind of laid the paper down flat and then just pressed them down on it with one finger and just kind of roughed up one side a little bit. And I didn't even do it that much.
I'm going to try both and I'll keep you updated.
Yeah. Let us know how the other one goes. I haven't tried the boiling water method, but I did read that was one other way you could do it. So yeah, they're doing pretty good. And I did lose a few, to birds because I forgot to cover them up. Yeah. I had the sea buckthorns in some pots too. And I had some chicken wire over them, but then I repotted them into some different stuff. And then I forgot to put the chicken wire over them. And the birds got up there and took about half of them. So now I think I've only got 5 or 6 of those out there now because
mine are going through a little bit of, so I had a bunch too that I'd started before you. I think I have 26 left. I think I lost another one this week, but they're going through a little bit of stress from the transplant. So we'll see. We'll see how many I get to keep. They're looking a little yellowish. I put some fish emulsion on them and some compost.
Okay. Well, hopefully they'll, I think they're pretty delicate they seem like out of the ones, everything I've planted out there, they seem like they're the thing that's the most delicate in the
I've read they can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I was surprised about.
They're such a resilient bush or tree, but yet when they're really tiny like that, they seem really delicate and touchy. So I'm hoping that they all survive what I got left.
I'm hoping mine are too, because I'm really excited about them. So.
I don't think those black locusts could be stopped at this point. They're going crazy.
Yeah, that's how my honey locusts are the same way. I didn't lose any of them to transplant. None of them.
Yeah, I'm excited about those. I'm going to plant a few and then who knows, maybe even sell a few. We'll see where that goes.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, I guess we can jump into our main topic here, homesteading myths and misconceptions or misunderstandings or however you want to say it. I'll just call it myths and misconceptions. And the first one was the opposite of what maybe some people think. You hear a lot of people talking about homesteading isn't hard. You should just do homesteading. And I wanted to take a different approach to that and say homesteading is easy as the myth, because I think a lot of people try to state the fact that homesteading is easy. And I think it's a little bit of a myth because it isn't super hard, but I don't want people to jump into it thinking that there's not a little bit about it that's not hard. It's not necessarily easy. I find myself extremely exhausted sometimes. And, and I find that I'm always trying to learn something new, or I'm having a lot of failures because I haven't learned how to do this thing yet. And sometimes the physical demands can be pretty intense at certain times of the year.
Yeah, for sure.
And finding enough time to do it all. I mean, there are definitely some things about homesteading that aren't necessarily easy.
Right. I mean, it's a lot of work. Even if that work is maybe easy sometimes, it can be labor intensive or just busy, a lot of busy work. You can have failures. I think that's when you say it's easy, people think that you're not going to fail. And man, I have failed so much. I have killed so many plants. People always ask me, everything you have so much growing and it's so pretty. How do you know? And I'm like, because I've killed a lot of things. I've
Yep.
killed a ton of plants.
Yeah. I'm
A
just
ton
talking
of them.
about sea buckthorns, not doing what I needed to do with
Right.
those to keep them alive. It's.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of plants. There's a few plants that I have tried multiple times and I can't think of it right now, and I have never been successful at growing it. I have tried I know, scarlet runner beans.
Yeah.
I love them, but I have never been overly successful growing them.
There's two things here that I've tried 7-8 times now for year after year to grow, and I'm horrible. I mean, one is celery. For whatever reason, I have the hardest time growing celery.
It's hard.
Two is actual head lettuce. I cannot grow head lettuce here.
Same. We've talked about this multiple times. If somebody has a tip on how to grow head lettuce, I would love it because we actually really like head lettuce. I know that it's not
and just can't.
Great for you. There's not a ton of vitamins in it, but we just like it. And I cannot get it to grow.
I have said I'm going to try to grow both in my aquaponics, and I've not done that yet. And I think they would probably grow in aquaponic systems.
I do think they like a lot of water.
But I've tried growing them in the ground, both of them, and I just do not have good luck. I get I'll get some celery, and it'll be real thin, and I mean it'll grow a little bit, but it just never takes off good. Never gets that big, nice celery, stalk like you want.
I have gotten celery to do that one time, and the only time I've gotten it to do that was when I regrew it. From when I bought it at the store. Yeah, so I regrew like 8 one winter spring when we were buying it. And I regrew those, and those did great.
From seed,
but I've never been able to do it from seed. Never.
So, I mean, I guess we say that to say that no matter how long you've been doing this, you're going to be still failing. I mean, there's still things you're going to fail at. And it's just not everything is going to be easy. Like I said, there's some days I don't feel like getting out there and doing all the weed pulling and all the stuff. And yet, it has to be done. You just have to do it. And it's not necessarily easy. And dealing with animals, they're going to get sick, and there's going to be things happen, and you're going to have to do things that you don't necessarily want to do. And it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to,
or they're going to get out.
They're going to break. Yeah. Or they're going to get out, and you're going to have to deal with that. I mean, there are going to be some challenges for sure. And I guess I hear some YouTubers and stuff. I've heard this a few times talk about, you can do this. It's not hard. It's easy. It's not necessarily easy. Just understand it's not impossible for you. You can absolutely do it. I'm just saying, don't go into it thinking this is going to be a piece of cake, because it may not be. Right.
Yeah. I mean, every friend I know that has cows has been out in the middle of the night chasing cows because they broke through the fence, or have had missing calves because the coyotes got them, or there's disappointments there, and I don't think it serves a purpose to be overly positive about it. Obviously, we're still doing it because we love it. I'm expanding into something bigger because I love it, but you have to be realistic about it too.
I've had years where I cut back too because I just felt like I couldn't handle it that year because I had other things going on.
I had one year where I had no garden because I got
you're doing a community garden,
Yeah, I got so burned out. So,
yep. Well, there's myth number 1. Myth number 2 is you can be completely self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I feel like that's definitely a myth. I wouldn't say it's impossible to be completely self-sufficient. I'm saying it's next to impossible.
Yeah, I think if you don't want to sleep, you could maybe be self-sufficient.
I think if you have very low expectations on what you're wanting to live on, like if you want any kind of diversity of food and any kind of, and you're very minimalistic on what you own and what you have, and you don't, possibly, the reality is in the past, people have been completely self-sufficient. People have lived in the mountains by themselves. It's not impossible, but it is very unlikely that you will ever. I think it
was more subsistence farming, where you're existing like that. I don't know. It would depend on the person. Some people would really enjoy that. I want to say that I would, but I don't know. I've never done it. I think of the book that we've talked about a few times, The Nearings, where they were pretty close.
But not really. They were still buying equipment and things,
they still relied on.
The reality is the reality is if you have a pickup truck that you're using to do things and a part breaks, you already right there are not self-sufficient. You didn't make that part.
it really breaks
You
down
know?
to the definition of
Yeah. I mean,
self-sufficient.
but the myth is complete self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
And how you're defining that. What is self-sufficient? Can you be self-sufficient in food? You could be self-sufficient in food. You could be self-sufficient in some things. You're not going to be completely self-sufficient.
Right. Well, and a lot of people also think of like Dick Proenneke, which is the Into the Wild guy in Alaska, but he still got stuff delivered by an airplane.
Yeah. You still need tools and things
Yeah.
to do things. And, I just bought a bunch of canning jars. You're going to need more canning jars. You're going to need more of this, more the lids and things. You're going to need stuff like that. I mean,
right.
you're going to need things.
Even if you don't need those, at least I don't have a salt mine in my backyard, and I need salt for my canning.
Salt. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm just saying the reality is you can say I want to be self-sufficient. Well, I think pursuing self-sufficiency is a great and ambitious goal.
It is.
And every step you can take towards that is great. I just think it's a myth to believe that you can be completely self-sufficient in this day and age. I just feel like it's not very probable. And if you go in thinking that you're going to be like that in a year or two, you might be disappointed. We'll just put it that way.
And I feel, I'm not saying it's not a worthy goal and people shouldn't strive for it, but I also personally, I enjoy what I get out of the community and sharing that. So I think that I do think a more worthy goal in self-sufficiency would be community self-sufficiency. But there is a myth that you can be self-sufficient. And yeah, I think people sell homesteading as that a lot.
Yes, I think so too. Yeah. I had a reporter just reach out to me wanting me to for an interview to discuss self-sufficiency. And I'm like, we are off-grid self-sufficiency. And I'm like, well, not exactly what we do here. So I'm probably not your guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I thought,
there's people that are close. I think we all know a few YouTubers that might be close, but they're on YouTube. They're using technology. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if something breaks, they're going to go around the store and buy it. They're going to get on Amazon or whatever and buy it.
Yeah. Here we're talking on microphones over the internet using electricity. Yeah. It's not a goal for either one of us, I don't think, to be completely
not entirely. Food self-sufficiency seems like a worthy goal more so, but then again, like you said, things like sugar and salt and things like that you're probably not going to grow yourself. I mean, there's substitutes for those things, but not salt. I mean, salt's something you're probably going to have to ship in.
Salt's pretty hard.
Yeah,
I mean, we do have a salt mine semi-locally, but yeah.
And if you live close to an ocean, you can mine it you can get it from the ocean, things, and dry it out and get it. I mean, there's things you can do depending on where you live. But here, I mean, it's very difficult. You're probably going to buy it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
But you could say I barter for it, and that's self-sufficiency. But yeah, or you could sell your stuff that you're growing to get the money to buy it. Does that count as self-sufficiency? I would say yes. Yeah,
you can get into the weeds with the definition for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I just put it out there as that. But just to say complete self-sufficiency, I think it's mostly a myth. Absolutely, I do.
I think it's a dream. It's like one of those fantasy dreams that some homesteaders have. I have to be honest, I've always had it. I always thought it was really cool and it'd be great, but I also realized I could never probably do it.
The idea of walking into a woods and building a little cabin and living completely off the land and never seeing people, I can't say there's been times in my life that appealed to me.
Right? Right? I mean, it's like everybody wants their own little Walden. And yet he walked and got food. So
I've already said what my favorite book of all time is, Robinson Crusoe. And, he lived
there you go.
by himself on an island with nothing. And I'm like, ooh, that's my idea of self-sufficiency right there. But yeah, not really ideally the way people are going to live. So anyway, myth number 3. The myth is you need a lot of land to be a homesteader.
Yeah, I think you and I have kind of proven that wrong pretty easily.
I think thousands of people have proven that wrong.
Yeah.
Whether you live in the city or the country, doesn't matter. That'll come into some other myths that we're going to address here in a minute. But a lot of land, you can live in the country and have, a tenth of an acre.
Yes.
And
there are people that do.
Yeah. So just because you're in the city or the country doesn't really matter. It's like a small lot. You can have a small lot anywhere. And you can homestead on that. You don't need a lot of land to homestead.
There's a lot of people that have tons of animals even on that small piece of property.
There's so much you can do to maximize space. We've done whole podcasts on it. Yep. Growing up, growing in pots, growing indoors. There's so many things you can do to homestead on a very limited property. And you get into the cities, you can do like rooftop gardens. There's just a lot there.
Hydroponics, aquaponics.
Yeah. And then
So
what
many
you've
things.
done in the past with like community gardens and shared spaces, you
Yeah.
can do things with that. So, I mean, there's so many ways to get creative if you don't have a lot of land that, you just got to think out of the box, and you got to look for examples of people that are doing it for ideas, because there's a lot of people doing it.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I was on a tenth of an acre,
And
and
there's a
we
lot
grew.
of places like makers spaces where
Mhm.
people can go and get equipment and rent it. We have a local library here that has a commercial kitchen that rents it out. So people can even without their own equipment. I mean, it's so doable.
Yeah. And we've
Yep.
talked a lot about that. What constitutes a homesteader? What is a homesteader? It isn't necessary. Do I think you could be a homesteader and not grow a single thing? I think you could.
Yeah.
I think when you think about, I mean, I've given the whole wagon wheel demonstration a few times in places. And, when you think about how many spokes on a wagon wheel
Yeah.
make up a homestead, and it's like, if you take out gardening, well, now you've got canning, and you've got making your own clothing, and you've got, you got doing these other things. And you can just source the stuff for that in different places. And I would say that you can still call yourself a homesteader on some levels, doing other kinds of things.
There's very few out there. There's very few people out there that are doing it all. Very few. There's just not enough time in the day.
Yeah.
So, yep.
So yeah, take advantage of some of the other areas of homesteading, and maybe less about growing large amounts of food. So absolutely, it's a myth. You do not need a lot of land to homestead. You need very little. And I would even say on some levels, and depending on what you're wanting to do, maybe even no land. So
yeah,
there it is. Myth number 4, homesteading is only for rural areas. I think obviously that kind of goes hand in hand with the last one. People think, I want to move to the country and be a homesteader. Or you could do it where you're at in the city. I mean, that's what I always say to people. Or you can just do it right where you're at.
That's because so many people, especially right now, the last 4 years, I think the land price everywhere has gone up to the point where it's just about impossible. So you don't have to be rural to homestead. You can be suburban, you can be urban. Yeah. I mean, I've been in
20 years ago, it was one I believed. 20 years ago, it was a myth I believed, because I wouldn't do anything where I lived. And I said, well, someday I'll get me a piece of land out in the country and where I can homestead.
Right.
And then situations happen, health things happen. And I figured out, I'm going to have to do this right where I'm at. And I seen other people doing it. And I said, wow, I can do this right where I'm at. You can do it. Right? You do not have to be in the country to be a homesteader. Yeah. It's a myth. It's a myth.
And you can, I mean, we've talked so many times about the different kinds of homesteading you can do in an urban setting. And we, like you said, we have podcasts about that. There's so many options. Our creativity, we're only limited by creativity. And YouTube has examples of so many people growing in very small spaces.
There's actually some benefits to growing in urban homesteads. I mean, you got access to more resources right around you in some cases. You got community support in some cases that's more accessible than out in the country. Obviously you're going to have some challenges like zoning laws and city regulations, depending on where you're at. There might be some legal things you're going to have to navigate there, but there's plenty of examples out there of urban.
Well, yeah, I feel like urban homesteading actually has a better turnout if you want to do market type stuff, because you're in a more densely populated area where you have more customers to reach out to. So I feel like if you ever wanted to be a market,
Yeah, absolutely. There's advantages and disadvantages to it for sure, but absolutely, it's a myth that you have to live in the country to homestead. You can absolutely do it in the town. It's something we've, again, the duration of this
we've beat that horse dead many times.
We've
us doing it.
If you've been listening to this podcast any length of time and you think that ain't, if that myth still exists in your head, you're not been listening too closely to us. Myth number 5: homesteading is a full-time job.
Oh, it can be.
So we started out saying, with this myth that homesteading is easy, right? Well, then you get the other side of that where it says people's like, well, homesteading is hard. It's a full-time job. It's like, you got to just dedicate yourself to it 24/7.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many things you can do to make it not a full-time. I mean, you can make it a full-time job if you want to be if you want to get into things like we're doing with cloning and doing some different things. It does take time, but you can also just plant your garden and that's it. And you can set that up with wood chips or mulches or certain kinds of row covers so you don't have to weed, and automatic sprinkler systems. So it really only takes you a few minutes a day.
Yeah. In the years I've been homesteading, well over half of those years, I was, truck driving, working over 70, working at least 70 hours a week and still coming home and homesteading, working a couple hours through the week here and there. And then the weekends on my days off doing it and doing our canning and things. And it made it happen. And it does. It goes back to that first myth. It's not necessarily easy to do that. You have to put in the work. You have to say, well, I'm tired, but I'm going to go out there and do it anyway. But it can be done. You don't have to dedicate all your time to a homestead. If you don't want to, you can absolutely do it and invest 10, 15 hours a week into it and accomplish a lot of your goals. You absolutely can.
For sure.
And there's a lot of things you can do in time management and things you can do to save time and, delegate tasks and even get help and just a lot of things you can do. But it's very, very possible to do it on a part-time basis.
I think if you want to do it, if you don't have a lot of time and the less time you want to put into it, the more time you need to put into the design.
Yes.
And how you go by it, how you go about it.
It'll be more difficult in the beginning and it'll get easier as time goes, as that gets more established for sure.
Yep.
Myth number 6. We just addressed this a little bit. Yeah. Homesteading means living off grid.
I hear that so much. I find it interesting.
They associate
that people think that's the same.
Yeah. It's not necessarily the same. It can be.
Because there are people off grid that are not homesteading. And there are people homesteading that are not off grid. And then there are off grid homesteaders.
Yeah, exactly. They're not one and the same necessarily. It doesn't mean going, not hooking into the power company and the water company and all those things. You can absolutely be part of that environment and be a homesteader. It does not mean you have to. I think it's great if you can be off grid. I mean, it's more self-sufficiency in your life. And I think it's a good thing. But you don't have to be off grid to be a homesteader.
Right.
The two, they don't necessarily, they're not one and the same, like you said. I think it's a good goal if you're aiming for that. It's actually not been a goal of mine. I mean, it wasn't a goal of mine starting out. Now I get kind of excited about the thought of it, having some solar panels and, having my water collection that I can actually check
ROI.
Yeah.
I struggle a lot with the ROI, but I do like it. And I do think we're going to, we have slowly done some of it here on the homestead. We have a couple of cameras out front on our driveway that are on solar. So we've been playing around with it a little bit. It's not that I don't like it. It's just for a long time, it's been expensive. And now I think it's coming down a lot in price and availability.
To me, I thought it'd be cool to take buildings and make them self-sufficient off grid, like my greenhouse, like put some solar panels up just for the greenhouse and operate everything in there off solar panels, or even my barn, say run the lights and things out there and get some solar panels and a battery set up in there, and then just kind of maybe baby step it to the house eventually or something. I thought that might be kind of neat to do something like that. But anyway, hybrid approaches are completely acceptable.
Yes.
Not doing it at all, not being off grid at all is completely acceptable and considered a homesteader, or being fully off grid is fine too. It's like they don't necessarily go hand in hand, but they can. Myth number 7.
I struggle with this one sometimes myself. So,
Rachel, do you have to know everything before you start homesteading?
No.
Oh, that's a myth? Okay.
It is a myth, although I do struggle with it myself because I want to know. I want to mitigate failure because I hate failing.
Yes. But here's the thing I've discovered is the quickest way for me to learn something is just to jump into it and start doing it. It's like I can read all I want about it. I can watch all the YouTube videos I want about it, listen to podcasts about it, but I'm really not going to learn that thing until I just jump in and start doing it.
Exactly.
You don't know how to do everything before you start doing it.
It's so true. You learn. It's like, I think about it like with bread. I think, if you make bread or bake, I always think about it like my grandma always, she never measured anything. A lot of people's grandmas get to the point where they never measure anything. And I remember thinking to myself, how does she do that? And it's one of those things you just have to do to get to that point. And now I do it. And my kids are like asking me how to make stuff. And I'm like, well, I don't really have a recipe for that. I just kind of make it. And it's just one of those things. You do develop a feel for things. It's probably, you're the same way. I mean, you go out into your garden and you're walking, and one of the things that you do by observation is you start to learn that tomato plant looks a little bit funny. Something's going on with that tomato plant. But you don't learn that until you actually do it and experience it and see it. So you do kind of have to do it, and you don't have to know everything you're going to kill tomato plants. I have cooked many flatbreads that were supposed to be poofy. It's how you do it. Unfortunately.
Pulling weeds, and my wife was out there pulling weeds with me a couple months ago, and she was like, I don't know what's a weed and what's the plant, because they were pretty young seedlings at the time.
Right.
And I know that. And I didn't even think about her not knowing which was which, because I just automatically know what that looks like, because I've been doing it for a few years, and she doesn't get out there and pull the weeds as much as I do. So she doesn't understand that's a weed and that's the plant, and so, I mean, you just learn these things. You jump in there and just learn these things. And I also would say that sometimes what people say might be a little different than experience too, because like I've heard people say things and then I experience it and I have a different experience than them. I'm not even saying that they were wrong about for them, but maybe because of where I live in a different climate, a different situation, it just works differently for me. So
especially with growing plants behave so differently, even in a different garden in the same area. It's just,
And I would even say in some areas like animals too. I mean, especially when it comes to like, different climates for like setting up waterers and different feed that you're going to feed them. I mean, it can just be different, and so
and even different soils for animals contain different minerals, or they contain different bacteria that you have to worry about. You might be
dealing with something that person never had to deal with. And I just think experience is the best teacher. I mean, just getting in there and doing things is the best teacher. Yeah. It's still good. It's still good to study things out and know it a little bit going in, because you don't want to go in completely blind, but you don't have to know everything before you start. That's a myth. You just don't.
Yeah. And I like your note here that you said in here. It says the value of community and mentorship.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where that comes in. Like you can, that's why it's important to have mentors that are local as you can find for, say, animals or growing or wildcrafting or mushrooms, because they have that experience, and then you can go and learn alongside them. And it does help mitigate that failure.
Yeah. I'm all for like getting the books and taking the courses and going to workshops and doing all that thing. I'm all for that. But again, trial and error is your best teacher. Like I said, just getting in there and doing it. So have resources of things you can reach out to, or things you can take advantage of to learn these things. Have that community and mentorship and have people you can reach out to, but get started. You do not have to know it all before you jump in there, for sure.
Right.
Myth number 8 was a weird one. I kind of went back and forth on this one to include this, but I do think it's a myth that some people, and I witnessed this, and the reason I put it in here is because I had ran across a couple kind of anti-homesteader people who look down on homesteading.
I have too, and I find it surprising.
And the myth is that homesteading is a step backwards.
Yes.
Our technology is so far beyond that. Now we've got a different way of doing things. We don't need to be homesteaders anymore. And they consider it a step backwards, not a step forward.
I know people like that. Yes.
I think it's a myth. I think homesteading as a sustainable modern lifestyle choice is a step forward, not a step back. I think we crossed the line in a lot of places. And I think when you take into homesteading, that step back is actually a step forward. If that makes sense. It's not stepping us back in health. It's not stepping us back in financially. It's not stepping us back in anything. It's actually stepping us forward in those things. It was actually a better way that we missed, I think, and went past.
I think you can combine. I think that you can combine the modern life with with homesteading and living outside and gardening. I don't think you have to have one or the other.
Well, and I think the real fault comes in when we compare traditional homesteading with modern homesteading. Maybe in some areas, traditional homesteading of what it was 150 years ago could be considered a step back on some areas. Being able to take advantage of a lot of the modern technology and modern education that people didn't understand back then is a step forward. But if you turned a blind eye to all advancements, it could certainly be a step backwards for sure. But I guess modern homesteading
things like solar fences are a huge step forward.
Absolutely.
Nobody's going to hire a shepherd to go and sit with their sheep anymore. They have electric fences and livestock guardian dogs.
Yeah. I mean,
that's
there
a
was a
step
time
forward.
when canning wasn't a thing. Pressure canning wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Putting things. I mean, to go back beyond that would probably be a step backwards. We've got that advancement, but now we've got things like you can freeze dry
Freeze
things.
dryer.
That
Yeah.
is such an advancement in technology. It's a wonderful technology. That's not a step backward. That's a step forward. I mean, there's things I think if you was turning a blind eye to all modern technology, like we were just talking about with solar panels to be off grid and things like that.
Yeah.
If you just turn a blind eye to all that and say, I don't want any part of that, that could be a step backwards, but not necessarily. It depends on what the kind of life you're wanting to live.
I know people that live primitively and they absolutely enjoy it, but it's not it wouldn't be my choice, but that's what people think of. People think of homesteading for some reason. They equate it with being primitive, going back in time like that. And we're all in prairie dresses and we're living in dugouts, cooking over buffalo chips. And
that's fine if you want
that way.
Yeah, it's fine if you want to, but I guess a better way to word this myth is that homesteading has to be a step backward. It doesn't have to be. It could be. It could be if you want it to be.
If you love it, pick parts of it and do that.
If you want it to be, and you feel like that's just a better way to live, it could be completely a step backward. But it doesn't. I
definitely embrace in my kitchen. I definitely embrace the slower, less modern style. I still use a pressure canner.
It's 50-50 for me. It's like I want to use a dehydrator and a canner, and I want to use electricity, and I want to go to a dentist and not have to pull my own teeth, and I want to do a lot of things that are modern. You know what I mean? I want. But I still like to hand chop my
vegetables, and I still like to hand. I like to hand roll my dough. I don't like to use my mixer, even though I have a beautiful mixer. I rarely use it because to me, I enjoy that.
Let me tell you something. I'm the opposite of you in this one area. I would much rather use a fruit processor than I would sit there with a knife and chop stuff up. I'd rather chop it with a fruit processor.
And that's why it's just a personal preference. For me, that's almost therapeutic hearing that chop, 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 but I can't stand the machines.
Yeah. See, I'm a little bit opposite on that. And that's fine. It's still, I mean, it's just quicker and easier. And exactly. I can take that step forward. You like the old way better. Everybody can live their own life, but it doesn't have to be a step backward. And I think that's a myth. And for those people who think that it is, I think you're just wrong, Yeah.
As much as I don't like all that stuff, having Sonia, and we've had Dave and Sonia on, and then I had Sonia on by herself talking about freeze drying, on a podcast, man, she's just about got me talked into a freeze dryer as much as
they're so expensive, but I won't.
That's right. I mean, I'm waiting for the price to come down in hopes that the price comes down. But if we were not thinking about the cost, the idea of it, I really like.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be pulling
for me at this point.
I'll probably pull the trigger on one pretty soon myself. I really love the idea of one, and just I've been. As I'm, the last few days, I've been doing a lot of canning, and I'm thinking, boy, some of this stuff would just be so much easier to just freeze dry if I had a freeze dryer.
I don't know if what sets me off about it is the electric bill. I hate electric bills, number one. And number two, it's another one of those things. There is some upkeep to the machine. But when I look at the jars, you can store them in bags. You don't have to worry about them breaking. They store longer. I love that. I love that it's lighter. It's
on the electric side, I use an electric canner to do about half my canning. So I'm using the electric anyway. So
yeah, I don't use an electric canner, but yeah. So anyways, that's like, as much as I like primitive, I have these weird little things. I think it can be whatever you want. I mean, we say that all the time on here. It can be whatever you want it to be.
That myth really kind of goes right into the next one, and they kind of overlap a little bit. But myth number 9: homesteading means going without modern comforts, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean in the ways of food prep and all that kind of stuff, but it just mean in just all your comforts. I mean,
I can tell you right now, in this very hot summer that we have had, which is a little bit unusual here, I love my air conditioner.
Yeah, and you know what? Some people would say they want to only use a wood stove. We don't have a wood stove in our house. And I'm really okay with it. I mean, I love a wood stove. It's nice at times to have a wood stove. But you know what? I cut a lot of wood when I was a kid growing up because we always only burnt wood. And I remember the first house I ever moved into where we had a furnace. And you walk over and you turned it. It was an old analog type. You actually turned the dial. Yeah. It wasn't a push button like more modern ones now. You actually turned the dial and the furnace kicked on and the house heated up. And I went, oh my gosh, that was wonderful to not have to carry in a bunch of wood, because I grew up doing that. Right now, I think there's a lot of nostalgia that I actually appreciate that now. I have wood stoves in my garage, in my barn. I appreciate it. It's nice, but
it's a lot of work though.
But not everybody wants to do that, and it's fine.
Or can.
It's fine to have that modern comfort of a furnace and an air conditioner.
Oh man, an air conditioner and the humidity, and it's hot. You're outside all day long in your garden. And I appreciate going to bed and sleeping good. I just really appreciate it. And that means air conditioning.
I love having internet access.
Yes.
We wouldn't be able to do this right here without internet access. I love it. Yeah. It's an important part of our life. There's just so much about modern technology that I appreciate having. And to me, homesteading doesn't mean going without any of those modern comforts.
Yeah. Well, YouTube. I used YouTube today to discover that my dishwasher has some kind of hidden, what do you call it? Drain screen or whatever that I didn't know existed. And I pulled my washing machine or my dishwasher apart because it wasn't working right, and found all sorts of gunk in it. And I didn't even know this screen was there, but I did that because of YouTube. That's what I like. YouTube can be like a university, or you can be encouraged on YouTube by watching other people do things you want to do.
And you can't always find everything locally. I've jumped on Amazon today in order my Berkey, which doesn't have Berkey water filters. I have the Pro 1 filters in it. Well, I'm due for some new ones. Our water's barely going through them. They're clogged up. It's time to get new ones. I got on Amazon today and ordered a couple new Pro 1 water filters for my Berkey tank.
And that is one thing I love. I love that the UPS truck comes to my house.
The creature comforts. Like I said, we got a dishwasher too. We got a washer and a dryer. My grandma, I remember growing up, my grandma didn't have a dryer. She put everything on a clothesline, even in the winter. She'd have a.
I will be honest. I love drying my clothes on the line. Not in the winter though. But I tell you what,
either,
I would not want to wash my clothes by hand. Exactly. No, thank you. No, thank you.
I don't, again, goes back to a lot of these are interlinked, like the off-grid thing, the last thing. These are all a lot of these are interlinked, but modern comforts, you can go without them if you want. I enjoy a bunch of them. Right. I just do.
Yeah. And I'm not against, if people want to hand wash, fine. Yeah. It's, you tailor your homestead to how you want it to be. But the myth was that that it was going backward, or you have to go back.
Or you're going without these modern comforts. Yeah.
And you can have modern comforts.
And you know what? I find it completely fascinating that people do that. I've watched YouTube channels of people that do that. Of course, they're showing on a YouTube channel that they've uploaded with technology that they're going without modern comforts. It's like, okay, well, whatever.
Right. And I've also watched people have complete automation of, hoop houses and nurseries. That's wonderful. That's modern. And they're still homesteading.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They have it all automated. They have it all on timers, and cool.
Yeah. I think it's great. If you can make your life a little easier and it works well for you, great. So you don't have to go without modern comforts. And you know what? You can have a TV, you can have cars, you can have all the things, but there's other people that would say, I don't want any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's the way you want to live, but it doesn't mean you have to be that way. Myth number 10, homesteading is isolating.
This is fun.
I wish. I wish.
When I read this, I laughed because I'm like, okay, you put number 10 in here. Homesteading is isolating. When both of us, believe it or not, listeners, we're both introverts.
Yeah, I'm almost borderline extreme introvert, but
we love being home. We kind of self-isolate for times, but
it doesn't. It doesn't
have to be.
Yeah. I would say most of the interaction I have is because I'm a homesteader. Unfortunately, it's because people just come up to me and talk to me about it all the time, or they get online and want to talk to me about it. And therefore, and so it actually draws community. It draws community being a homesteader. For me, it does, especially online, but even locally. I would say most of the interactions I have in my neighborhood are because I'm a homesteader, because people will see me out there working in the garden. They'll just come up and start talking to me about it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be isolating. It's not necessarily isolating. Now, if you're living way out in the boonies, you never see nobody, I would say it's less because the homesteading is isolating. It's just because of your location that's isolating. But it doesn't have to be isolating for sure. And I think there is a myth about that I don't want to homestead because I don't want to be lonely. I want to have a life. I want to be around people. Well,
right.
that goes into the
you can
next
build that
one,
in.
of course. But again, it just there's a lot of interactions, especially if you want to take it to another level of where you actually want to be a market farmer. You're still going to be dealing with people. Both of us just went to some homesteading events in the last couple of weeks. We've both done that where we was around people and again, we're socializing and doing things. And again, it doesn't have to be, if you go to the farmer's market and hang out there, see people, I mean, there's all kinds of opportunity to be around people.
Well, and even in rural areas, you can know your neighbors. We've already met several of our neighbors who, some of them are actually homesteaders and farmers, and we've already met them and talked. And of course, that's what we talked about. But it doesn't have to be isolating, unless you want it to be. And if you want it to be, that's fine too.
But I've heard people say that it's a myth, and they've said, I don't want to homestead because I like people too much. Well, good. Right. You'll fit right in. There's lots of people in homesteading, and you'll talk to a lot. And it goes on to the next one. Homesteading, myth number 11. Homesteading requires giving up your social life. It doesn't require that. No. It sounds wonderful to me because I'm not very social, but it doesn't mean giving it up. It can actually.
I will be honest, it can be hard when you're busy because you have a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah, that part can. It can, but it doesn't have to.
Right.
Occasionally me and my wife will still go out and eat at a restaurant and with another couple sometimes, or do something like that. Again, we just talked about how we both went to a couple of events. Yeah. That was a social activity. I took my grandson, you and your husband went, I mean, you're out and about and you're doing things and you're having a social life. If you do set up at like a farmer's market or something for your products, you're going to get all kinds of activity there.
You're going to get social activity
there. Yes. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity to have a social life as a homesteader or not. It depends on what you want,
Right. And it'll probably come in seasons. There's going to be times when it's going to be harder, but you can still make that happen. Like you said, you can have people come over. You can always invite people over for dinner, even if they're not homesteaders. Invite them over for a homestead meal.
Yeah. We like to play euchre. We like to have people over and play euchre. That's our thing.
Oh, euchre.
Have a meal with us and play some euchre. We'll have a good time, right?
I thought that was just a Michigan thing.
Oh, I guess not. I thought it was only an Indiana thing. So there we go. And it also depends on what kind of homestead you have. If you have a homestead that you're a business, maybe you do farm tours. Do you think that Joel Salatin has any lack of people being around him in isolation and not having a social life? That dude's out there.
Probably struggles to find some privacy.
Yeah, that guy's probably having trouble to have any alone time. Exactly. So I'm just saying there's plenty of opportunity to integrate friends and family into your homesteading activities and even do things outside of homesteading activities with your friends and family. There's plenty of it. It doesn't mean giving those things up if that's not what you want to give up. But I also think, again, this takes us to the next myth. And this one could be true depending on what kind of homestead you have. Homesteading means means having no vacations or travel. And here's what I would say about that.
Yeah.
Your type of homestead and how you set it up. It can make vacations and travel hard.
Yes.
But here's the thing. If animals are the main thing that can make that difficult, you can move your travel to off-season travel and vacations. And if you're just a gardener, if it's just a garden, and you can do most of your stuff in the wintertime, right? Depending on where you live, you may not have a wintertime, but for us, we can just travel and take vacations in the wintertime. But if you have animals, now you have to get farm sitters and somebody take care of animals. I actually, a few times I've done this, processed animals and then just repurchased breeding stock.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that because we have talked about doing this several times where we buy like a feeder pig or a steer in the spring and then butcher it in the fall or in the winter and then take a month in the late winter, like February. That's doable. The other thing is you're going to end up having to, hopefully that's one of the good things about having a community is hopefully you can find somebody that can exchange maybe some homestead sitting or maybe there's some one in your area that's what they do. We actually have somebody in our area that they don't have their own homestead, but they go and homestead sit for several people.
Yeah, that's cool. Be a nice little side business, even if
It would be a good side business. I've actually thought about doing that, and I was actually just asked to do that for somebody, and unfortunately the timing didn't work out, but I was asked to come to their house for 6 days and milk their milk cows. But it just didn't work for me. But I was really bummed because I actually really wanted to do it.
And I know, and you can even, there's ways to do it with careful planning of when you're going to do these things and when you're going to plan around the animals and when you're going to plan around somebody actually taking care of it for you, or when you're going to plan on, processing or harvesting or whatever. Obviously there has to be some management of your homestead to figure out the dates. But beyond that, like I know you took a few days off this summer and just had automation.
Yes.
To be able to manage it. And you had, automatic watering set up and,
I took 9 days.
Yeah. And went away.
And we had automation on my seedlings and with lights and watering. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And that's
it actually worked fine.
And you're putting a lot of trust in something not failing for sure.
Yes.
But I'm just saying it's a possibility, especially if you had that and somebody who would check on it every day or two or something to make sure it was all working right. That would even be a bigger bonus. And that way they wouldn't have to do any work other than just look at it. And then if something failed, they could let you know, you could talk them through it. I mean, there's so many ways around it. It just takes a little bit of planning and thinking about it. I guess the myth is though, that it means no vacations or travel. And that's a myth. There's absolutely a way to take vacations and do some traveling and be a homesteader.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely gets a little more difficult. And especially depending on what kind of homestead you are, but it's not impossible. And I guess we just want to break the myth that you can't do it.
Right. Yeah.
You can take some time away, and you should, because burnout's a very real thing also.
Yeah, I would. It's been a real thing for me. I know it's been a real thing for you, and I don't even have, a large farm or anything yet. So I can imagine the bigger you are, the more it could happen.
Yeah. But the bigger you are, maybe you got people working for you that can manage things.
Very true.
Too. So, I mean, it could actually be easier to do that. So anyway, myth number 13, you need to be a jack of all trades. You just need to be able to do everything on your homestead all the time. You never know what you're going to need to do.
Right.
You need to be a jack of all trades. This is a myth. Is it helpful? It can be helpful because otherwise you're going to hire some stuff out and you're going to have to call on some people to help you, whatnot. But you don't have to be a jack of all trades.
You can also barter or trade some of your skills for somebody else's skills.
Exactly. You can go work on their homestead, do the thing they're not good at. They can come help you do the thing that you're not good at. You don't have to be
something like welding. Yeah. I think welding or car maintenance, maybe not maintenance, but even car maintenance or fixing cars or
carpenter.
You can hire some of that done, or you can trade, barter, whatever. But you don't have to be able to do everything. Nobody is going to be able to do everything. It's just kind of impossible.
And you may be a homesteader who knows a lot about livestock, and you're a livestock homesteader, and you might have a friend who's a gardener homesteader and doesn't have any livestock, and you guys just barter and trade and help each other out. Or you don't know a lot about your garden. That person can help you with your garden. They don't know about a lot about livestock. They got some livestock now. You can go help them with their livestock. You don't have to, again, it goes back to what we said earlier. You don't have to know everything. Right. Well, you also don't need to know everything about everything. Okay.
Yeah. And if you do know a lot about everything, it does become overwhelming because you have to fix everything and everything relies on you. So sometimes it's better to not be a jack of all trades because it doesn't always all fall on you.
Well, and also there's a second part to that statement too. It always comes with two statements: jack of all trades, master of none. Generally, when you're a jack of all trades, you're not exceptionally well at any of them, or maybe one or two of them. So I would consider myself in a lot of ways a master of two or three things, and maybe a jack of all trades. There's a few things I definitely wouldn't be, but I mean, I definitely do a lot of things, but I would definitely not an expert in most of those things.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
So there's some trade-off there.
There's a few things. Yeah, I would say that for myself too. I'm like way better with the food preservation than I am, say, with understanding soil. I would like to know more about soil and understand it better. But yeah,
I definitely lack in the kitchen.
I wouldn't say I am an expert for sure, though, not in soil.
I mean, as much as I do for food preservation, I still feel like it's not my thing, and cooking is not my thing, even though I'm trying to learn more and more about it all the time. Some of the, textile work, things like that. I don't hardly know anything about that kind of stuff, when it comes to mechanical things and gardening and maybe working with livestock, I know a lot about those things. I've been doing a lot. I enjoy those things. It's also the things you enjoy, you tend to learn more about, right?
Yes.
So, but you don't have to not go into homesteading because you think you're not a jack of all trades.
Oh, and again, we're back at, that's what community is for.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Just focus on the things, specialize in the things that you want to make those the core of your homestead, and then get the help you need for those other things. You don't have to do them all. Myth number 14. You can't homestead without extensive experience.
Yeah.
Kind of goes back to what we've been saying.
It's a good thing this one isn't true because you or I wouldn't be here at all.
Yeah. A lot of people, and it's good. There's a lot of people who maybe will go do some, they'll go work as a woofer or something on a homestead, learn it. I think it's great. It will definitely help you step into some things and transition easier, but you don't have to have that extensive experience. Again, this went back to earlier what we we're saying. Sometimes the best way to do something, to learn something, is just jump into it and start doing it. The more you know, the better, but you do not have to have extensive.
I knew absolutely nothing of this lifestyle when I started. Absolutely nothing. My parents didn't even care about green grass. I didn't know how to cook. I knew nothing. There's plenty
of people getting into homesteading who were not raised on a homestead, that don't really know anything about it. They just like the idea of it. They want to go that way. They do it and they work. It works. I was raised more on my homestead, got away from it for a few years and then went back to it, but it wasn't something I felt like I had to have extensive experience in it to do it. Anybody can do it.
It's a good thing nobody told me that myth, because I probably would have ran away and gave up. And yet here I am, because I literally knew nothing.
And the reality is, you're never going to know it all. I learned,
especially as fast as science is growing, and as fast as we're learning about the soil and everything that's going on in it, we're never going to know it all. It's impossible.
Just changing all the time too. I mean, you're dealing with new things all the time. So, I mean, I don't know. It's just, I feel like that it's a lifelong thing. Your experience is going to be gained in different areas on different things for the rest of your life. Like I said, I learned things this week that I didn't know the week before, or learned more about those things that I didn't know about the week before. It's just the way it is. We were talking about, like you just talked about, collecting seeds for microgreens. Well, now that's difficult. It's like you've been growing microgreens, you've grown microgreens, you've done sprouting, but then this is the first time you tried to really save all the seeds you were going to use for that.
I tried to be sustainable.
Yeah, and and you're like, wow, this is really hard.
It is.
Again, you're learning new things all the time. We both are all the time. So I just think you can really, if you just go and just thinking, I got to know more, I got to be more experienced, or I can't do it, you're never going to get there.
Yep.
Myth number 15. Homesteading is only for those who own land.
Yeah.
Did you rent land and be a homesteader?
I think that one of the country's biggest homesteaders / farmers rents a large portion of his land. Joel Salatin.
Yeah, he rents a lot of his land.
He rents and leases a lot of his land.
I actually know somebody who borrows somebody's land to homestead.
Yeah, that's a thing too.
These people homestead on their parents' land. Their parents don't homestead. They take a section of their parents' homestead. They don't charge them anything, and they homestead it.
Yeah, I mean, and I did this something similar. I rented a spot at a community garden, and I homesteaded there. I grew stuff there for a while.
You even had the option to run chickens on your neighbor's land at one point. I don't know if you ever took advantage of it, but it was an option.
I did. So that was kind of my backup plan if we didn't end up getting the acreage, if we didn't end up finding property that we wanted and it just didn't play out. My second option was I had talked to several of our neighbors and talked about running chickens and adding gardens onto their land, kind of almost like what Curtis Stone did with spin farming, but not for selling. I was going to
trade for them.
I was going to provide for them for food, because the way we are where we're at is the amount of chickens that you can have is based upon the square footage of your piece of property. So we can only have 4 chickens, but the people behind us can have, I think it's 20 or 25 chickens. So I was going to run egg layers on the people closest to me on their property. And then the people behind me that have more acreage, I was going to run meat birds.
Yeah.
And then plant gardens. And they were all supportive of it. They were wonderful.
Yeah. So a person who just rented a place and had that kind of community, they could absolutely take advantage of those things like that. You don't have to own any land. You wouldn't have to own your land, or you could borrow other people's land even to do this. Like you mentioned, Curtis Stone, he was spin farming on everybody's land in a town. He was just taking their backyard.
Yeah, and then he took it to market.
And then he was
money.
Yeah.
Big money.
He was farming on other people's land for a portion of the produce.
He was making really big money. I don't know if those videos are still around, but I also know Justin Rhodes had a video of a couple of, when he did his Great American Farm Tour, there was a couple people in the Great American Farm Tour that did that. They would farm on other people's property and do market farming.
Yeah, you absolutely can do that on rented land or borrowed land. And there's so many people open to that, especially if they thought they could not have to do the work and get a portion of it.
Yep. They were all for it. They're like, you want to use my land to grow eggs and chicken and vegetables, and you want to give me that, and all I have to do is let you do that? Yes.
And again, I think portable structures, advanced thinking and more modern technology and modern thinking has really made us think about like portable greenhouses and portable chicken tractors and all this, mobile coops,
portable fencing and solar chargers.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So, and there's just so many more opportunities because it's really just out of the box thinking from 100 years ago. People weren't thinking that way maybe back then. And we've really looked for new methods to make this stuff easier. Because I think time constraints are huge today. We're such a busy people, on other things other than the homestead, where maybe more focus was put onto the homestead 100 years ago. Now we got other things. We want to be more social. We want to do other things more. And, so we want less time. So we've started thinking about ways to make this quicker and easier. And, and that's opened up possibilities for doing this on rented land and other people's lands.
There's people renting large facilities doing indoor gardening like hydroponics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not theirs at all. And they're renting it and then selling to restaurants or, maybe that would be more farming because you're making money or whatever, but it still can be homesteading too. There's just so many options.
Or you don't own land, but you have a home, but you have no land. Indoors. There's a lot of things you can do indoors. I'm just saying, just because you don't own land doesn't mean you can't homestead. So that's a myth, I do believe. Myth 16, homestead's just a trend. The homesteading thing is just a trend.
It feels like, I can see where people would get that, especially the last few years, because it has grown exponentially. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that some of that growth is kind of dropping off now.
I definitely see an up and down with it.
Yeah.
It goes up and down.
It has been going on. We had the Back to the Land movement in the 70s.
I was getting ready to say the same thing. This has been
the Homestead Act in the 1880s, 1870s created a whole bunch of new homesteaders where they would go out into the wild and homestead.
And then you had the whole Victory Garden movement in World War II. It's up and down, but it's never been just like this, this little trend. Now, I think there's things in it that are trendy.
Yeah.
Like,
sure.
The backyard chicken trend, I
sourdough bread.
Yeah, sourdough bread and the cattle panel arches, for your trellises. Right. I see these trends happening. None of them, I won't say they're good or bad. I'm just saying I see these trendy things in homesteading. But I think homesteading as a movement is not a trend. It's
been going on for centuries. Number one,
it's just life, right? It's just the way life's been done for certain people. It's not a trend, but there are things in it that are trendy for sure. Yes. So I'll say that's half myth, half not. But homesteading itself is not a trend, but certainly some parts of it can be trendy for sure. Especially this. Yeah. What we call it? What was the term I put on it here at one point?
Instagram houses.
Well, yeah. What was the little?
I can't remember the wording you used.
Yeah, there was like a little. It was a spin off of glamping. It was like glamp homesteading or whatever, glampsteading.
Boy, I can't remember. Yeah,
glampsteading or something. Where it was like.
And that does seem trendy. You go onto Instagram, and if you put in hashtag modern farmhouse or something like that, and you get the all white farmhouses, and definitely a trend.
definitely the more beautiful parts of homesteading are more trendy. Yeah, you get that really people the Instagram picture trends.
Yeah.
There's definitely things that are a trend in this lifestyle, but homesteading itself, it's got historical roots, long term.
I think you're always going to have a segment of the population that always do it.
Yeah, always have, always will.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing it since I got married, so
yeah. And it definitely, I see at times when it gets more popular than other times. And it seems
right
like
now is probably one of those times.
World events tend to, things look more serious in the world. Homesteading gets a little more trendy, I do think so. Or people start leaning that way, or at least food growing in general gets more popular, for sure. But myth 17, homesteading means constant hard work with no downtime. So we started this whole thing off with homesteading is easy was a myth, but I also think you got the other side. Homesteading means that it's nothing but hard work and you're never going to be able to stop. And it's just, oh my gosh.
I mean, it can be that way if that's the way you design things, but you can also say this is too much and back off. I mean, you can do as much as you want to do.
I think it's definitely seasonal.
Yes.
In spring and fall, I feel like I'm working myself to death.
Right. Exactly. We're going to be honest here. It's exhausting.
Summer's a little slower. Winter's a lot slower.
Yeah. I mean, by the time I get to fall every year, I'm like, I can't wait for the garden to die. But by the time the seed catalogs start coming in January or February, I can't wait to garden again.
And definitely it can be the opposite if you have animals, because they actually get more difficult in the wintertime because now you're breaking ice out of the water troughs and you're doing it. I mean, it just depends on your homestead setup, the way you designed it, and what kind of homestead you are and the seasons.
And in the winter with big animals, that's often when a lot of homesteaders butcher.
Yeah. You can make it easier. It's about balance and management and purpose. You got to purposefully schedule some downtime.
Yeah.
Yeah. You and I have said many times we love to read. When do you do most of your reading?
Me, probably in the morning.
Yeah, I do most of my reading. I'm going to not go time of day. I'm going to go seasonal. I do most of my reading in the winter time.
Winter. I always
definitely read all year long, and I'll read like a half an hour here and there. In the winter time, I can sit down for 3 or 4 hours and read because I got more time.
Exactly. Yeah. I have that in my mind. I actually have this list that's a physical list that's winter projects, and almost always on my winter projects list is learn about this, read this book, learn about that, read that book. Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, I'll schedule a couple days a week where I just intentionally kind of stay out of the garden too. And I just don't really go out there and do anything. I got other stuff that I'm working on where, I might go spend some time with. I just told you me and my grandson are going to go do some fishing. It's important to break away and go have some downtime and go do some fishing, some hunting. Those even can be considered homestead activities, but for me, they're downtime, right? Because I love them so much. It's enjoyable. And I'm spending time with my grandson and doing those things. So it's like, it doesn't have to be constant hard work.
No, for me, physically, my job can be physically demanding. I know yours can be too. So I actually typically schedule when I work long days. I typically don't go to the garden, or if I have to, it's 10 minutes, just because I have this one plant or this few things that I need to check on.
If I know there's things that if I don't pick them, they're not going to be good the next day.
Yep.
Some tomatoes that are super ripe or some cucumbers are going to be yellow in a day. I might go grab those real quick. And that's an extent of my garden visit. Grab them, get them in the house.
You kind of have to plan it like that, or you can reach exhaustion for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, it doesn't mean no downtime. You can certainly make it mean that nothing but hard work and no downtime. It doesn't have to mean that for sure. I think it's important to add a little bit of rest and relaxations and some downtime in there.
For sure. I mean, there's a reason why we're commanded to have a day of rest.
Yeah. I do try to take definitely some time off away from even I enjoy my garden so much, and yet there's still times I got to get away from it.
Yeah.
It can wear on you. Myth number 18. Homesteading requires a lot of animals. I think we've done killed that myth earlier when we were talking about.
Yeah.
what a
And I think we've
homestead
killed
is.
it in our podcast so many
Yeah,
times because I've had chickens, but I have
yeah.
not had animals all these years. And
I
I
go.
definitely consider myself a homesteader.
Mhm.
I've had numerous people tell me I'm not a homesteader though, because I
Because you don't
don't
have
have
animals. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think it's a myth. And I go through seasons. I've actually processed all my animals and went, a season without them, and then bought some new stock and had animals again. I think the longest I've went is about a year and a half. I went without anything, just garden. I just garden. I took about a year and a half away from all the animals.
But you can
But I still every year I go a little bit, and sometimes I'll even get rid of my breeding stock and say I'm just I'll wait 6 months and start over because I'm tired of it. I want to take a break away from it, and I've done that many times.
Yeah, and you can have just a few animals. I mean, you can have a small flock of chickens and a couple of rabbits and a milk goat, and that's a homestead. Or you can have 50 or 100. It
There was
doesn't.
one whole year. All I did was I kept a breeding stock of rabbits. I had 3 rabbits. I just kept a buck and 2 does, and I didn't even breed them that entire year.
Right.
I just fed them. I didn't even have a lot of animals. They were really doing me no good, but at the same time, it's just like that. I was, it's just what I did that year.
Yeah.
I will say they did some good. They produced manure that I put on my garden.
Exactly.
There you have it. They did some good.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's just depends on where you're at in life and what you have.
And where you're physically at. Some people can't have animals. It's just It does not work for them where they're at.
It does not require it. It just absolutely does not require it.
And to be honest with you, we probably don't have any listeners, but maybe we do. We have a few homesteaders that don't want animals because they're in a more vegetarian or vegan lifestyle, which that's not us, but we don't mind if that's what people do.
I've had guests on. I've had some guests on that were living that life.
Some people do not want that. I mean, I think of that book again, The Nearings. They didn't have.
That was them. I would consider them homesteaders, absolutely. And they didn't do anything with animals.
They were amazing homesteaders. I have both of Helen Nearing's books. Fantastic homesteaders. They did not have any animals because they were vegetarians. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And not my lifestyle, but it's yours. That's fine. Yeah. I have no problem with it. It's just a myth. Myth number 19. Homesteading means your kids won't get a proper education. Rachel, you're guilty of this. You failed to give your kids a proper education because you were homeschooling them. No,
you know what? I know so many homesteaders that have their kids in private school. I know so many homesteaders that have their kids in public school. And I know so many homesteaders that have their kids in homeschool. It has nothing to do with
it. Does not mean that you're going to homeschool your kids. My kids were public schooled.
You do not have to homeschool your kids to be a homesteader.
Yeah, you don't have to. And even that does not mean they're not getting a proper education.
Right. No. Yeah. I would
not. None of those 3 things mean they're not getting a proper education.
Yeah.
So it's just a myth. But there are people who associate homesteading with homeschooling and associate that with a poor education.
Yeah. Which I find fascinating.
Which is funny because some of the smartest kids I've ever met in my life were homeschooled.
Right. I mean, I think of, Thomas Massey is a fantastic homesteader and he's very highly educated. Mm-hmm. My kids went to college.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean,
they were homeschooled. So
they're just not necessarily, those 2 things are, for one thing, they're not even necessarily associated with one another or have to have anything to do with one another. But even if you do consider that homesteading and you're going to be a homeschooler and it's part of your homestead, that doesn't mean it's not a proper education. So it's all myth all the way around. That's a myth.
The whole thing is a myth.
And yet there's people who would absolutely say that.
Yeah.
People really
that's
like
crazy
that.
to me.
So, it's a myth. Absolutely. Definitely a myth. Myth number 20, homesteading is only about growing food.
No, this isn't a myth. This is true. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it isn't about just that. No. It can be so many more things than that. It can absolutely be about just all the other things, preserving food that you didn't grow. You can do that.
I know a young man that grew up very primitively. He's on a homestead. This guy can grow food. And he doesn't have animals and he doesn't have a garden, but this young man learned how to tan hides so well that people seek him out.
Yeah. People
He
they're
definitely,
more into the bushcrafting skills. They're into the hunting and the fishing and the preserving that and doing things with that stuff. And that's to me, that's quintessential homesteading. I mean, that's
oh
like
yeah, my husband, that's like the part my husband likes the most about quote unquote homesteading is the hunting and the fishing.
Yeah. It could be, and that could be all your homestead. That could be everything you do.
Yeah.
It could be building primitive buildings and I mean, it could be, there's so many layers to homesteading. There's so many things that are involved in it. It can be so many things. And
there's people out there.
If you take the food out, the growing food out, it can still be homesteading.
There's people out there growing flowers and using those as their homestead, and as homestead business. They're growing herbs and using that as their homestead. I mean, it doesn't have to be about food for sure.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, there's crafting and building and animal husbandry and, food preservation, all those things that don't necessarily mean you grew it. So it doesn't have to be one and the same. It doesn't have to be that. So I guess this is more for one that people, again, a mindset thing, I think more than anything, that think if they don't have a place and they're not have the ability, they don't have a way to grow any food.
When I started homesteading, I think if you listen way back, I don't even know when we did that initial interview where I sat in the parking lot of a coffee shop and you interviewed me. But how I think in the interview I talked about, I started homesteading and preserving by buying from a local grower because I wasn't growing anything. I would buy bushels of tomatoes and cucumbers and potatoes, and I would go home and preserve those. So I wasn't growing anything.
When for the first few years I was homesteading, I would never grow corn on my homestead because it felt like it took a lot of space and I didn't want to use that space. And you could buy it so cheap because there'd be like these roadside stands of people selling corn everywhere, sweet corn everywhere. So I would always just go buy sweet corn and then bring it home and do the preserving with it, and I wouldn't grow it. Now I grow it, but I wouldn't back then because my lot was a lot smaller. I only had half the property I have now. And I just didn't feel like I had enough room and I could get that so cheap. You could go do that with all your stuff and preserve it. That's homesteading. Yeah, absolutely. You were doing it and other people could do it as well. So I think it's a myth. And our final one, myth 21, homesteading is outdated and irrelevant. We have moved beyond the homesteading movement. We're an advanced people. We live in a whole new world, and what you're doing is just outdated and irrelevant. It's not necessary. So there you have it, Rachel. It's truth.
This should just be our last podcast then.
I think it's been viewed as a trend, and there's been this resurgence of homesteading for a reason, because sustainability is important. It's not outdated and irrelevant. Self-sufficiency is important. It's not outdated and irrelevant. I'm thinking about a few years ago when this thing happened and the grocery store shelves were empty. Oh yeah. Homesteading felt extremely relevant at that time.
I felt a little bit validated.
Yeah. I think it's nothing outdated about growing some food. There's nothing outdated about knowing how to preserve some food.
And even if you show up, even if that never happens, the quality of food that we're growing in our gardens and the quality of food that a home gardener can grow, or even the quality of food that somebody making food from scratch can make, is so much better than what you can get anywhere else.
Oh yeah. And just the nutrition, health wise, it's extremely relevant. Yeah. It's going to provide you with way more nutrient dense food. You're going to be way healthier. Not to even mention just working in a garden and working with that stuff can make you healthier. When we think about the ecosystem and the environment, I mean, good organic homesteading and a lot of people doing it is just way better for the planet. I mean, that's not outdated or irrelevant. That's definitely a growing problem that we're addressing. Mm-hmm. When you think about preparedness, what I just said about the grocery store, I mean, it's extremely relevant. Yeah. I mean, on so many levels, homesteading is not outdated or irrelevant.
We both, if people have been listening to this long enough, we both started homesteading because of our health. And homesteading and that quality of food, either buying it from the farmer's market or buying it from the farmer or growing it ourselves and then making it from scratch, literally brought us both back to health.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is
definitely
valid.
put effort in it for sure.
It's valid
Yeah.
in a society now where people are wondering how to get healthy again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
and then too, just for me, the emotional aspects and I am just a much healthier person because emotionally, because I can spend time outside or spend time in my kitchen doing these things. It really grounds me.
yeah.
So I really, for
I
me,
think
it's
it's
been
always
a
been,
huge health.
I think it's always been relevant. I think it'll always be relevant.
Yeah. And then
I
the
don't think it'll ever be
pocketbooks, that was
outdated.
another, that's one myth we didn't talk about, was that homesteading is expensive.
Well, I feel like
But
it's definitely one that should be in here, and
But that
it
was
can
it.
be. It is
That's
doesn't
the
have to
other
be.
thing. That's the
Yeah.
other reason that it's relevant, is because it does save money when you cook from scratch. When you grow things, you can save money. It can
Yeah,
be much more affordable for your family.
absolutely. Yeah. The
So,
reality is there's probably 50
a
other
billion of
myths
them. Yeah.
that people bring up and talk about and use excuses against homesteading or what homesteading is or isn't. And you could probably confront all those. But this is 21 and that I think are,
Hmm.
pretty important to understand because it does a lot of things. It definitely changes your mindset about homesteading,
Yeah.
whether you're thinking about homesteading or whether you're a homesteader already and you just got a leaning towards certain things. It can definitely affect your mindset. And also just talking to the world about it too. We need to be able to recognize these myths. And when people say these things, we need to be able to say, well, that's a myth. Let me show you why and explain it to them. So I think it's important to understand these because again, because I feel like that why I wanted this one last is because I feel like it is so relevant. We need to understand these myths and be able to convey them to people as myths. This is not true about homesteading. We've always lived in a world. I don't want to say like today is worse than yesterday or 20 years ago. I think it's always been relevant. I wouldn't even say it's more relevant today than yesterday or the day before. It's just always been relevant. Right. And I feel like people need to recognize that, the importance of it. And if you have any desire or you have any of these concerns, if you have any health concerns or environment concerns or preparedness concerns or financial concerns about food, if you have any of these kind of concerns and 100 others, homesteading could be viewed as important to you. And you need to understand the relevancy of it and to understand that it's possible for you, no matter where
And
you're
it's
at.
possible, as I always say at the end of every podcast, it's possible to do where you're at. It's grow where you're planted. It's in the city. It's in an apartment. It's with no land, with lots of land. It is what you make it, and you design it. You make your homestead the way you want it and what works for you and your family. It doesn't have to be like what everybody else's is like.
Exactly.
And everybody's welcome. All skill levels. That's something that we want everybody to know, is that everybody's welcome in this community. And we want to expand the community and encourage people.
Yeah. And people, not everybody knows everything. And when people ask questions, it's like, it might seem like a silly question to you or something like that, but that's what we're here for, to answer that question and say, well, yeah, here's the answer to that, because we've all been there on something at some point on something where we didn't even understand the most basic of things about it. And we had to ask a question and there's nothing wrong with that. So I guess with that, we'll close by saying, you can do this where you're at. No matter how you are or how your land is or what you are or where you're at, you can do this on some level. Whether you own land or rent land or have no land, live in an apartment, whether you are young or old, whether you are healthy or disabled, there's even ways you can do it in those situations. There's a way for nearly anyone to homestead on some level.
Yes.
And I just think that's important that we always point that out. So folks, until next time, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.